We are not talking about the informative 2020 manga, My Brain is Different. At least, not exactly. In my adult life, especially in my 30s, I've been learning about what's called neurodivergence. Put simply, neurodivergence is when your brain deviates from the norm in terms of how it works and behaves and functions. It's a wide umbrella that covers conditions like ADHD, autism, schizophrenia, dyslexia, and a whole bunch of other things. Generally, things that have long-standing effects. Important to note, neurodivergence isn't a problem to be solved. It's a difference in how you are. And as a result, there's medications and things that you can take to help with different symptoms, but you can't make them go away, which is part of why things like ADHD and autism and schizophrenia and the things that I mentioned are so challenging. They're persistent. They impact your life all of the time. Now you have a little bit of context. So let's fast forward through my entire life up to the pandemic. At the beginning of the pandemic, I was doing pretty well. I was getting exercise, I was losing weight, I was cooking, all the things that I'd wanted to do in my life. Working remotely was something that I had done at a previous job, so a lot of it felt kind of natural to me. But as time went on, different patterns started to emerge. I would start piling up different things across the house. Sticky notes were left all over the place to try to remember where I was in terms of working on something. I noticed I would get bored pretty easily. I would adopt some hobbies and then stop doing them. There would be this sort of shame spiral where I would take on a lot of different projects and then start failing on them and then not talk about them, and then feel bad about failing at them, and feel bad about feeling bad. And the more that I thought about it, these were not things that were happening recently. These were patterns that had been happening throughout my life. At around the same time, I was seeing a lot of tweets and information on social media about ADHD broadly from folks like ADHD Alien and Danny Donovan. They started to get the gears turning in my head that maybe my brain works differently. Maybe part of the reason that I was struggling wasn't just the pandemic, but maybe something else was also going on. If you told me when I was younger that I had ADHD, I wouldn't believe you. Partly because back in the 90s, ADHD was not portrayed in a particularly flattering way. I don't even mean that it was unflattering, I mean it was the same way that ADHD is often portrayed, which is the way that it affects other people. It's often portrayed as like the impulsivity part, the hyperactive part. And that is not always how it manifests in people's lives. Also, the idea that it's called attention deficit disorder, when it's not really so much a deficit of attention as it is an abundance of it. There are too many things for me to focus on. It's the reason why sometimes I need to listen to music so that I have something to focus on, and other times where I can't listen to music when I'm working on something because then I'm like, there's too much noise. It's also pretty hard to get diagnosed. Here's what you need to meet as an adult to be diagnosed with ADHD. This is also assuming that your doctor is pretty willing to go along with you, which, man, there's so many barriers to getting mental health assistance. There's like two broad categories. Inattention. As an adult, you need to meet at least 5 of these criteria and also have them be present for 6 months or more. They're like, this has to be persistent. Fails to give close attention to detail, often has trouble paying attention, often doesn't seem to listen when spoken to, often doesn't follow through on instructions, often has trouble organizing tasks and activities, often avoids things that require persistent mental effort, is easily distracted, is often forgetful in daily activities. Then you have hyperactivity and impulsivity. 5 or more criteria, 6 months. Often fidgets with or taps hands or feet, often leaves seats in situations when you're supposed to stay seated, often runs about or climbs in situations where it's not appropriate. For adolescents, this could be feeling restless, often unable to play or take part in leisure activities quietly, is often on the go or acting as if they're driven by a motor, often talks excessively, often blurts out an answer before a question has been completed, often has trouble waiting their turn, often interrupts or intrudes on others. These were very familiar to me. These need to be present before the age of 12. They need to be present in multiple settings, and there has to be clear indication that it's impacting your life and can't be better explained by a different diagnosis. The combination of those things make it very hard for anybody to get diagnosed with lots of different neurodivergent conditions because, you know, as an adult especially, you learn different behaviors to mask, to hide the fact that you had that condition. As a coping strategy, I forget the dates and times of things, so I just put everything into a calendar religiously. People's birthdays, anything that I'm considering doing, just goes in the calendar. I have been fired from different places that I've worked at. So I've learned that the negative behaviors that led to the failure, I should just like keep them quiet, even though they're not necessarily negative behaviors. They're just how my brain works. And so people take those behaviors and they mask them. This was an example with my doctor. They said, well, after talking with you, you're pretty successful. I'm not seeing any of the symptoms, so you don't have ADHD. Just from talking with me. He's like, no, everything's fine. I later got a different diagnosis by going through a bunch of tests, and they're like, yes, except there's no history when you were younger, so we have no idea. Where am I going with this? I don't know. Yeah, getting diagnosed was challenging. Getting access to mental health resources is hard. There's not a ton of them. It can be expensive if you're going through private diagnosis. There are doctors that have older, outdated ideas of what neurodivergence looks like. I guess the worst part, and the reason that I pursued a diagnosis, did I actually mention that I have ADHD, or did I just allude to it? I have ADHD. I eventually got diagnosed, as I've just mentioned, but the reason that I did it was because one thing that I can't get access to without a diagnosis is medication. It turns out your doctor can give you anti-anxiety meds, antidepressants, no problem. You can just talk to your doctor, you're like, I feel sad. It's like, here's some antidepressants. I have ADHD. It's like, well, we feel bad about you going on stimulants, so we better get a heart test and a diagnosis before we do that. Is ADHD the right diagnosis? I don't know, maybe it's autism, maybe it's something else. All I know is that now I have tools that I can use to describe how my brain works differently and how to find solutions to problems that I might have. There's a fantastic book that I purchased called The Anti-Planner, and it gives you a bunch of resources and exercises that you can do if you're feeling unmotivated or stuck or disorganized or things like that. And so I can just grab a page and try something. Knowing that I have ADHD means I can try to separate, is this problem because of the situation or is it because of how my brain works? And then I can come up with strategies that work. I feel like I might have bounced around in a lot of different places, and maybe that's just more of how my brain works differently. I hope that you enjoyed learning a little bit about neurodivergence and a little bit more about me. Tomorrow we'll be talking about BTS, but probably not the BTS that you're thinking of. I have ADHD. I don't know where I'm going with this. That seems like an ADHD thing. Nope, I don't know where this is going. I don't know where this is going. I've got a bunch of words down there, but none of them feel right. Why did I snap? I don't have anything ready. Why am I saying this? I gotta record a f***ing video. It makes me feel better, Nick. Makes me feel better. I would adopt some hobbits. I would adopt some hobbits. I would adopt different, it wasn't even hobbits, it was hobbies.